Thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of Natural AF. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And we are your hosts for this amazing show where we dive into what it means to be our natural selves, connecting to nature, our true identities, and really out of curiosity and love for ourselves in this environment. How does this really work? How does our environment, how does nature really work? And all the different ways that it's very empowering and freeing for us because we love our freedom. So to support you on your journey to finding the best possible healing and the best possible outcomes for your life, this episode is all about holistic healing with homeopathy.
So today we have the beautiful Melissa Kupsch on, who is the founder and director of RMDY Collective, where she blends her expertise in homeopathy with a forward-thinking approach to business. She has built a successful brand that offers innovative wellness products and services focused on personalised natural health solutions. Through RMDY Academy, Melissa is also committed to educating and empowering the next generation of homeopaths and wellness professionals. Known for her strategic vision and compassionate leadership, Melissa is dedicated to making holistic health both accessible and impactful. And what Melissa's doing on this mission of hers is so incredible because she really is revolutionizing and, I feel like is going to be a big part of the resurgence of homeopathy. I mean, we are seeing it around the world, but for sure here in Australia, she's a pioneer in this area. And, and now the offshoot of RMDY Collective is RMDY Academy, where they are training the next generation of homeopaths, which is so exciting. I'm so pumped for this.
Yeah. I mean, you can go and find remedies and try them out yourselves, but there's nothing that really compares to having a really on point, somebody that knows a lot about homeopathy. But what Melissa's doing to train this next generation of very qualified, very capable homeopaths is going to make this much more effective for people because you don't have to do trial and error, figuring out what remedies work and don't work. What they're doing is so effective. And I can't wait to get into why what they're doing is different.
And it really is. Like, I've been using homeopathy for most of my life, and there is a difference with kind of the old school homeopaths to what sort of how Melissa talks about it and how a lot of people are now talking about homeopathy and how it is foundationally healing on an energetic level first and foremost. And then we see the results of that through the physical body. So absolutely love this conversation. I think so many people are going to get so much value out of it. And for those who may not stick around right till the end and hear the outro, we want to let you know now that we have an exclusive discount code for the RMDY Collective. So they have remedies that you can just order online. They have kits, first aid kits. They have an online training course. So all of those, you'll get 10% off using the code NaturalAF10. They actually have, which we're going to order pretty soon, they actually have the Fibonacci Home Accord remedies, which Melissa will explain exactly how they work in this episode. And they're so good to have in a kit because they contain all the potencies. So whatever potency you need is in that one bottle. So I love it.
Yeah, we had such a great time talking to Melissa about all things homeopathy, and we take, it's a good amount of information. So if you need to break this into two parts, totally get it. It's a long one, but go back and listen to it a couple times because this is one that you're going to learn a lot from. So in news related to natural art form, things are chugging along nicely. We were at the markets this weekend and it was great. We had a kind of record numbers for us. So definitely feeling an upswelling of energy. Things are starting to happen. We're working on a lot of projects all at once, it seems. Going to the markets is just a huge value for us because I get to see what concerns people have in their daily lives. And I get to see kind of a pattern of what people are dealing with. There's a lot of shoulder and neck pain, a lot of stress-related tightness in people's bodies. I even had one gentleman that he worked at a computer. He's not a fitness guy, doesn't do like a lot of exercise, but he's just getting a tight neck from always looking at his computer. And he rubbed a little bit on his neck. And within a minute before he was done, he was like, this is amazing. Bought it right there on the spot. And his wife was trying it on for her elbow. People are getting tennis elbow, and I don't think they're playing tennis.
Yeah, it seems to be a really common complaint, doesn't it? It's funny.
Yeah. So with all this feedback from people and stories and interactions, I'm starting to come up with other ideas for how to best serve our customers, because it's kind of hard to talk to somebody about, like, let's take Regenerate, for instance, it being a really good first aid burn remedy for, stovetop burns or sunburns or anything like that. But there's also a really good application for it for your face. And, I'm 52, but I only look like I'm 32. So I put it on my face every day and I look really young, but it has ingredients in it that stimulate collagen production, that help with collagen synthesis. So if you're taking collagen supplements, something like Comfrey and even Arnica and calendula can also help your body make use of those things when it's repairing itself. So these things I'm thinking of, and I'm looking at splitting off the remedy into a face cream and something more for skin health, as well as something that's more of like a first aid burn remedy, because that trauma medic die hard. Anyways, you can get all this and more at naturalartform.com. If you're in the United States or throughout Europe and around the world, you have access to Alleviate for right now, and we're still working on getting things set up in the States for the deodorant and the skin repair. So keep an eye out for that.
Sign up to our mailing list. Head to naturalartform.com and you'll get a little pop-up. You can join the mailing list, and that's where you'll get the first news from us. So all the updates, any exclusive discounts, our schedule, everything that's going on for us, you'll get in that monthly newsletter.
And without further jibber jabbering, let's get into the episode.
Enjoy, guys.
So welcome, Melissa. This is a great sit down. I can't wait to talk about everything homeopathy and what led you here.
For sure. Thank you for having me on. I talk about it, a lot, and I never get over sharing all the different aspects of it. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. And I love hearing you talk about it. We went to the Remedy Social event at the end of last year, and I was crying during your speech, and, just heard you on a recent podcast you did with Alex Zek, and you can just feel the passion come through your voice when you speak about it, and you speak about it so beautifully. So we've been really looking forward to this.
Awesome. Love it.
Well, to kick it off, for our audience, maybe just share a little bit about what brought you to homeopathy and now this mission that you're on with Remedy.
Sure. So what really brought me here, it was sort of a, twist of fate, like it is for a lot of people, but I was studying originally to be a naturopath. We're Australian. A lot of people know naturopathy sort of first and foremost when you're looking at holistic health. So that was what I wanted to do. My dad's a doctor, my mum's a hippie, and it just seemed like the perfect merging of the two. So I was 2 years into my degree there studying naturopathy when I had this lecturer who used to talk about homeopathy quite a lot. He would just sneak it into the lectures wherever he could. And, because he actually was teaching anatomy and physiology. So he's teaching about like all the, diseases and things, what goes wrong with the body. And he'd just be like, well, homeopathy can help with that. Homeopathy can help with that. And I never paid attention because I'd never heard of homeopathy before. And I just thought it must be some real sort of wishy-washy sort of, superficial thing. I was like, it couldn't be that good because I've never heard of it. So I ignored him for a good 6 months. And then my sister Ash was in and out of hospital for many years with chronic UTIs. So if she had sex, she would get a urinary tract infection, which would go into her blood. She would always have to be admitted to the hospital. It would be IV antibiotics. Sometimes it was so severe she's on an oxygen mask. And this started when she was, maybe 16, 17 and continued on for like 5 years, nearly 6 years, I think. And it was like really full on, she would be hospitalized like every other month. And, she'd had all of the mainstream testing, even all of the holistic support. She'd done Chinese medicine. She'd done naturopathics, herbs, grounding, meditation. At this point, she was completely incontinent, pretty much. Well, not completely, but, had to go to the bathroom every 20 minutes. So it was so disruptive for work, It's like, how do you hold down a job so she's 21 at that point. And so then one day he drops some bomb about homeopathy. I'm like, right, that's it. I said, well, if you can cure my sister's chronic condition, I will change my degree over and I'll study it. And he said, great, when can she meet with me? So we meet in a coffee shop and he just has a pen and paper and he's just asking her, pretty much, tell me about yourself, tell me about your life. And that was pretty much it. And it's just like letting her talk about, the nature of the UTIs, when they started, what happens, all of that. And then he went back to her earlier life and he's like, all right, tell me all about your childhood. What things do you like? What do you not like? What foods do you crave? How warm is your body temperature? You know, some people run cooler, some people run hotter. In homeopathy, that can be significant. And just really trying to get a feel for her mental, emotional, and physical health, just all over. And at the end of that 90 minutes, he said, great. All right. Thank you so much for all that information. I'll send the remedy, you know, with Melissa tomorrow. All good. And so then we leave. I'm like, okay. And he meets me at uni tomorrow and he gives me this little bottle of drops. And he says, ask your sister to take, you know, 2 drops under the tongue every morning and every night. Just give it a good bang in between. And I did think to myself then, like, what, like, she's got these chronic, serious problems. And really, she's just taking 2 drops under the tongue in the morning and the night. I was like, okay, sure. And, give that to Ash. And things started to happen almost immediately, you know, like physical discharges coming out of her body and a lot of suppressed anger coming up to the surface. Now, as women and especially as young women, you know, she's only 21, we often just keep a lid on it, right? There's like nothing favorable about women expressing anger. And so a lot of us do, you know, just push that down. And that started to bubble up, you know, and there was nothing like big and crazy really that had happened in her life to really lead to it. But for whatever reason, that was the vibration that her body was in. And so this starts to purge as well. And within a couple of days on her remedies, she said to me, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I just went for a walk to the park and I just like kept walking and I didn't need to go to the toilet for 2 hours, which at that point was a massive change. So we could see that things were working. And long story short, she actually stayed on those remedies, you know, over 6 months. She just, you know, was dosing constantly, you know, kept them in her handbag and just kept it going. But she broke that cycle with the UTIs. So where those leading doctors in this hospital, I mean, they are specialized doctors. Head of infectious disease says to her, he had said before we went to homeopathy, he said, you need to be on prophylactic antibiotics every day for the rest of your life, potentially, which anybody knows. That's just a carpet bomb for your gut. Yeah. But he said that and he said, and you really can't have sex. It's too dangerous. And so you imagine as a 21-year-old being told that, you think, how am I ever going to get married? How am I going to have kids? It was like a death sentence, really. So to then have it all broken, and obviously she has an amazing life, like everything resolved. She's got kids, she's married, she's happy. It just, it blew my mind at that point. That's and amazing. So after witnessing that, I thought, okay, I definitely need to look into this more. But then I still wasn't quite ready to change my degree because it was so unbelievable to me that could have been the cause. And you ask yourself, could it be a placebo? Like, my gosh, I don't know. And then when I saw Peter and I had my own case taken, had my own personal experience, I say, all right, that's it. I'm in. And, you know, that would have been just over 10 years ago. And then look where we are now. So Peter and I run the academy together where we train up other homeopaths. And it's amazing. I feel like the world has just opened up to this understanding of vibration, really.
Yeah. There's definitely a time for it. You can tell there's a shift. And that's been on my mind quite a lot because we grew up with natural remedies in my family, but homeopathy wasn't really well known. And in the States, you can buy them like a lot of places, even Walgreens, like your typical pharmacies will sell homeopathic remedies, but it's the little plastic containers with the pills in it. They do work, but from learning from you and what you've shared with your experience, there's so much more depth to what homeopathy offers. And it's like elevating now, like even just in the past year or so, I'm hearing about it from more and more people. And I think the advantage here in Australia is you guys don't have it as commercialized as in America.
Oh, no.
So the practitioners like you are actually, I don't know, I think you're starting like up here with homeopathy and then seeing where it goes rather than just pulling something off the shelf like everyone and then, you know, leaving it at that.
Yeah, well, they've actually actively tried to suppress homeopathy here because just out of curiosity, Mel, where did you study naturopathy?
Endeavour College of Natural Medicine.
So studied at Endeavour. This was only probably maybe 7-8 years ago when I started. And so I did holistic nutrition, and I started in 2017, and they still offered homeopathy then. And we've been using homeopathy since I was maybe around 5 or 6 years old, and for most of my younger brother's life. And my mum always wanted me to do homeopathy. So when I started there, she said, why don't you do homeopathy? She kept saying, and I was like, no, I don't know. And then I did my first year, and I kind of did all those base subjects, and I was like, oh, I reckon, like, I don't know, I kind of just had a bit more of a better understanding of the body and stuff, where got to a point where I was like, oh, I probably could now understand fully how this works and get more into it. And by 2018, they'd scrapped it. And that was also around the time where they pulled all the insurance, the health funds got pulled from all of the natural modalities, including homeopathy. That was all around that time. So they've done a really good job here of like really trying to suppress it because it works.
Oh, yeah. And there used to be, I'm pretty sure Peter said there was over 100 RTOs that offered homeopathy in Australia. So there were lots of courses. Endeavour taught it obviously at all of their campuses. It was huge. And then, because of that, it makes it, I guess their goal would be make it inaccessible for people to study, and then you never have to worry. I mean, if you don't have well-trained homeopath, like you would never have people being healed enough that there's always going to be homeopaths working in private and doing good work, and lucky are the people who find them. I was chatting to a guy recently. He's so funny. He works in the government and he has worked for the ATO. He's also an accountant and also a lawyer. And when he said that to me, he's like, I must sound like the most boring guy ever. But he's like, I promise I am really fun. But he's doing some legal work for me. And he said, all right, what are you doing? What are we trying to set up this structure here for? And I said, well, I'm a homeopath. And he's like, oh, and he's like, I don't meet many homeopaths. He said, homeopathy saved my life when I was, this is in the 70s. He said, I was bedbound. He said, I was so sick, and every doctor gave up on me. They just said, there's nothing we can do. And he was just riddled, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, all of these things.
Wow.
He said a homeopath completely brought me back to life. So then he's obviously very invested in our mission of what we're trying to bring forward, because, imagine if he'd never just stumbled across a homeopath. He was so lucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have them as often or in as many places in the States. I've been looking because my dad has some issues with eczema and different things. He's older, and I'm trying to find a homeopath near their home, near my parents' place in Wyoming, and it's hard to find.
Well, that's why I'm so excited that you guys are running the academy now, and you've got international students, because I think this is the time now. I think we're just kind of see it go boom. Like it's really gonna, it's so exciting. But we'll get to that. So let's really dive in. And for our audience, and it's funny because for someone that has used homeopathy most of my life, I understood the like cures like. I understood like sort of the fundamental principles. However, I didn't fully start to understand the energetics of it until sort of the last few years, when I started to get more of an understanding of that on a bigger scale, and that we're all energy and all of that. So I really want to dive in, and maybe let's start with, I don't know, whatever you feel like you want to start with, whether it's maybe the history and how it sort of was discovered, or do you want to start with how it works and the principles and then go into the history? Totally up to you.
I'll go with how it works first, so that people really understand the nature of the human body and how homeopathy can help us heal. So really with the human body, when you break it down on the smallest levels, and, we're talking like the subatomic particles that make up a human being, what scientists have found is that we are essentially, for one, empty space in the cells, but it is humming, vibrating energy. It's phenomenal, but we are energy slowed down enough to be perceived as mass. But at the very core of those particles, they do find that we are just made up of energy, and all living things are. And so we as homeopaths acknowledge the body and the vital force. So this is that energetic mechanism that runs through your whole body from the moment you're conceived, really, because you've got the sperm, it comes across and it reaches the egg. And if you watch that under a microscope, you see this little blast of light at that moment. And that blast of light that they call the zinc spark, I would say that is the initial ignition of that energetics. Like that is the incarnation, and that is what brings that vital force in, but it's this divine intelligence that goes forward to grow that baby. And it is miraculous when people really stop and think about it, that a mother's body with no input from the mother, she doesn't have to do anything mentally to knit together a perfect little baby, perfect eyelashes, eyeballs that work and can see, and ears that can hear, a spinal cord. And you just look at the kidneys and think they maintain this delicate fluid balance. Human beings are incredible, but it is energy first that goes forward to grow the baby. So what we all have is an energetic blueprint. And it's sort of like running the show of how we get put together. And a lot of that blueprint comes from mum and comes from dad. That's why we often look like them, right? We've got similar features. They've donated that energetic material. So people often forget then that when we are born, that vital force does not leave us. You know, it's still there, constantly trying to create homeostasis. And I would say the vital force really only knows how to try and heal and protect. That's its constant sort of MO. And so what happens when we go through life and we experience traumas, they impact the vital force, and that will very often develop into disease. If those emotions are not dealt with, if the trauma itself is not sort of dealt with, that's when, you know, we can start to manifest disease. But it's not just trauma. I'd say there's probably three sort of king hitters, and one would be your energetic inheritance. What is susceptible coming down your family lines? If you've got a strong history of cancer, that does not mean that you are going to have cancer in your genes, but it means that energy is going to make you more predisposed if you don't deal with the energy. Now, people can mitigate it a lot with diet and exercise, but I've seen people do all the right things and that disease process is so strong, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, you know, cancer, diabetes, it's a susceptibility coming down. So that's one of the big things that play into disease. Another one is our toxic load, and that can be food, that can be injections into the body, it can be medications, can be stuff you're breathing in, stuff that's in the soil, whatever it is. But the toxic load, it does interfere with how the body cells, you know, should be operating, the brain, inflammation, stuff like that. And then the other is your own personal traumas going through life. So I think if we sort of can acknowledge and work with those three, that's how we really get in a better state of health. But as for homeopathy itself, when you consider that the vital force and the human body is made up of energy, it makes sense that an energetic stimulus could be used to trigger the body into a healing response. Now, this is what Dr. Samuel Hahnemann found in the late 1700s when he was doing some experiments. So here is a guy, he's a medical physician. He's just sort of outrageously smart. You know, one of these ones, he knows over 10 different languages. And because he was not happy with practicing medicine at that time, even though he was fully qualified, he just said, you're doing damage. I won't be a part of this. I will not do heroic medicine. I will not jam them full of all of these, you know, herb supplements, polypharmacy back in the day. They would sometimes add 70 different ingredients into a concoction and say, there, take that. He's like, I will not have it. So he stepped back from that and said, instead, I'm just going to translate all these medical texts and make a living off that. So you imagine how much you learn about medicine and the body and history of things. So he's doing that, but he comes across some of these, I guess, scientific findings that people were doing back then. And this is where the like cures like principle was really born. You know, it sort of started with Paracelsus, who's sort of considered, you know, maybe the father of pharmacy back then. But what Paracelsus said is that the difference between a poison and a cure is in the dose. You could give a minute dose of something and it could trigger a cure. So Paracelsus, for example, back then, a lot of people had syphilis, very degenerative disease, killed a lot of people. they had 200 hospitals in France alone, and they were just like literally syphilis hospitals. That's how much syphilis was rampant. So bad. Compared to now, rarely do you hear people talk about syphilis. It's like a real rarity. And, so it's rife. But what Paracelsus would do, he was called on to treat the rich and the monarchs and people in that day. And he would put a tiny bit of mercury in his ring. And when he was in there with them to treat them, he would give them this minute dose of mercury. Now, mercury, when you ingest it, it actually causes things like ulcerations and degeneration. When you give it in the crude dose, it causes symptoms that look like syphilis. But when he went in there using that like cures like principle, if you relay it to homeopathy, he gave a tiny little dose and the vital force recognized it, stimulated a response, and then these people were healing from syphilis. But you also would know that many doctors did not understand the law of the minimum dose, like this minute amount. So there was lots of mercury poisoning. A lot of destruction was done with mercury, and people died a lot from mercury poisoning. But this is why, in homeopathy, we take substances from nature, and that might be certain plants. A lot of herbs and plants we take medicine from. We do it from some like animal tissues, things like a bee sting, things like, what other animal ones do we use? Things like dog's milk. It's the most bizarre thing, such an amazing remedy. But everything in nature, it has this vibration. So mercury is no different. We have a homeopathic remedy made out of mercury. So you can have it out of minerals as well. But what we are saying is that you can take these unique vibrations, and if you can match it up to the distortion of energy for the human being in front of you, and then you give it to them, their field, their vital force recognizes that energy. And when you ingest it, the vital force mounts a response to push back against that artificial stimulus. And when the body pushes back, that's when your symptoms disappear. So that is the essence of like cures like. We're very particular about diluting the dose to make sure it's never toxic, but it is powerful.
I have a question about how they come up with the remedies for some things, like the dog's milk, for instance. What does the dog milk remedy do, if you remember on the top of your head? And how do they figure that out? How do they tell what this is good for?
So the only way for them to know is to harvest some of the material, make it into a homeopathic remedy, and then they run a trial on healthy people. They call this a proving. Now, there are some people in the world who are very sensitive to energetics. So if you were to get 100 people in a room and give them this homeopathic remedy, the great majority probably wouldn't have anything to report. But there are some people who they can almost, and part of the reason I think that they then manifest the symptoms and can talk about it and bring it out is because that distortion actually existed in them already on some level. So when they took the remedy, it became very noticeable what it could be used for. So that remedy for dog's milk, it's called lac caninum, and bitch's milk, we call it. And when people take that, what the people in the provings would have found is these feelings of self-loathing, of dissociation from their body, suicidal tendencies, obsessive tendencies. And so this is one of the remedies that I use when people have, it's often, but not always, a history of abuse, or maybe sometimes they were put up for adoption, things like that have led them to turn all of this stuff on them, a lot of shame, but self-loathing is huge. So they might do things like cut themselves, and it's just this energy, they're in so much pain. So it's a very unique remedy picture. So, our textbooks, my gosh, they are so thick with all of the symptoms that goes into each one. So the work of a homeopath is to learn them, and then you've got to recognize them in the patients when they come forward, because people sometimes are unaware. Some people don't realize the depth of their self-hatred, you know, under the surface. It's the subconscious sometimes that we're trying to really see what manifests. But when they are given the correct homeopathic remedy, a lot of stuff starts coming out, starts moving. And you move someone from hating themselves intensely to just being in balance, you know, a normal, spiritually connected human being. So that's my favorite part of homeopathy, is moving people from the depths of their darkness to joy, really.
That's so different from my experience in homeopathy, because it's like, this is affecting psychology. This is going into the realms of like, oh, you got to go to psychotherapy for, you know, half your life. And then hopefully one day they'll find a prescription to numb you out, to help you continue your life so you don't kill yourself. But that really affects me, because I have a lot of love for people in the military. And we have a kind of a crisis that's been ongoing with men committing suicide. And it doesn't make sense to me, but knowing the kind of like, you know, well, one, the vaccines and injections and stuff, and the way that we're finding out those will have impacts on their psyches. Just knowing that homeopathy has something to offer with some of these things. I don't know if you call that a miasm, but the fact that homeopathy helps with the psyche is brand new to me. It's like mind blowing right now.
Well, you think as like military men, the things that people have seen, you know, the horrors that you would have to compartmentalize to a point to be able to do the job, you know, for a lot of people that you're asked to do. And not only that, but a lot of people who are drawn to the military field, you know, we have different remedies. You know, I could think of, you know, a bunch of them that have suicidal tendencies. But if we were to chat about this one remedy, Aurum Metallicum, homeopathic gold, this is where the people have a strong sense of duty and, you know, they want to protect. They are so prone to being military men. If you were to watch on Netflix all the war movies, pretty much all of those main characters, they're Aurum people. And so they're brave and they do these things, but they have the strongest, probably, affinity towards suicide. So you imagine going into a job like that, you go into like a war or something, you compile it with the things that you see. Some people, you know, have things like survivor's guilt. I didn't do enough. It's sort of like a classic sort of feeling. And then, you know, a lot of them have a sense of, you know, I neglected my duty. I didn't do enough. And that guilt and that anxiety of their conscience, they can't live with it. It suffocates them every day. So then they just think, I just have to end it. I can't live like this. So yeah, there's a few remedies, but you could give that to somebody in the depths of darkness and see the light come back on. And then because we have to move that energy out of their body that feels like I can't exist here anymore. You have to lighten the load. Your aurums typically have just so much on their back. They just can't see any other way through but out.
Well, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that was the only thing that ever really helped with my depression growing up. And yeah, so we always knew that even for these, and because back then too, I had anxiety for most of my teen years, but I didn't know what anxiety was. It wasn't talked about the way it is now. And and I remember, I'm not surprised that your textbooks are so huge, because when you go in for a homeopathic consult, you're asked questions about, like how you grew up, and things that like when you go like in traditional medicine, like they don't even ask you. It's just about the physical. Whereas with homeopathy, you are asked about, well, how do you feel? Or like, does it feel better or worse at night? Are you better for hot? Or are you better for cold? Like there's so many, even just like focusing on the physical, there's so much more inquiry into the person and what's going on for them than traditional medicine. And, yeah, it's like you said, you were so surprised, like, oh, just a couple of drops under the tongue, a couple of times a day. It's incredible the shifts that can happen. And I actually do want to delve a little more into the remedies, because we'll get into miasms in a sec, but I'd love to talk more about the constitutional remedies and how you kind of get to someone's constitution, because is that more like their energetic blueprint, would you say, or how do you guys see it from a homeopathic lens?
There's so much debate in homeopathy between homeopaths around, is there such thing as like each person having one constitutional remedy that fits them throughout their life? And, or, so other homeopaths would argue, no, you always look at them in their totality, right? So if you were to come into me, I do want to know everything about you, but I'm prescribing only to the disease state. I'm only giving you a remedy for the symptoms that are out of balance. I'm not giving you a remedy for your inherent, who and what you are. But what's interesting, and to be honest, I'm on the fence in this debate because I've almost sort of seen it swing both ways. I understand both arguments. But, if you look at myself as an example, the first remedy Peter prescribed me was sulfur. And when you read through the textbooks about sulfur, it's kind of comical because it talks about, a lot of personality traits and things that a sulfur might be like. And that's just inherently how I have been. So, I do believe that there are people who have like quite an affinity, maybe not just for one remedy. Say for me, I do think that my constitution is quite sulfuric, but there is a possibility that I could dance around throughout my life with the other remedies around sulfur. They sort of go in family groups. You can have relationships. So a lot of them, I would tend to stay in those sorts of spheres. So with your sulfur, like they're very brain heavy, love to like delve into probably more academic pursuits, but to the neglect perhaps sometimes of like real life things. So an example, my mum used to say to me a lot growing up, for someone so smart, you just have no common sense, things around the house that I would not care about. I would not think about. There are just things in my life, and often sulfurs, they can be quite messy, and it's because like they don't care. Whereas if you look, for example, at a silica, or a carcinosin, they are meticulous. Do you know what I mean? Their appearance will be quite meticulous. They are more your, OCD sort of perfectionists in a lot of things. Their room would always be tidy, organized, and, they're a lot more anxious about how they're perceived. They've got a lot of these sorts of things going on, whereas that's much less likely in sulfur. So even when you look at people's like genetic makeup, like my natural setup is much more robust, much more grounded. I'm not prone to the sorts of things that these other remedies go through. So I think it's a little bit about like proneness. So I do believe that some people have like some natural tendencies that align with who they were always meant to be. And when given those remedies, it's almost like just a bolster of the vital force, because like that's my one. So I definitely understand that line of thought, but I understand why other homeopaths say that stuff doesn't matter so much. You've got to just look at the disease state, what symptoms need to be treated, heal them, and then let whatever comes after that. So yeah, but essentially with classical homeopathy, if we use the word classical, not constitutional, classical is always where the homeopath is going to sit down with you and they're going to take really a minimum 60 minutes, usually 90 minutes or more. And we do want to know everything about you and about your disease state. People come in with anxiety and the doctor says, okay, you've got anxiety. Within 7 minutes, they've written a prescription for anti-anxiety meds. But the homeopath wants to know, what does your anxiety look like? I've worked with women who were so anxious they couldn't do the grocery shopping. I've worked with people so anxious, and it's just about social settings. How am I perceived? They become obsessed about, did I say the right thing? They're on the way home in the car with their husband and they're saying, in this conversation, do you think I came across okay? What would they be thinking of me? and it rules their mental space. Some people, it's severe performance anxiety. So anxiety looks different for everybody, and you can only find the real like healing of that if you figure out what it comes from. Some people, their health anxiety about their body and about like, staying alive. I've had men who have gone for ECGs, like over 30 ECGs, every time being told there is nothing wrong with your heart. It's fine. Go home. He will be in the doctor's office like once a week, just like wanting to do checkups. His health anxiety is just so out of alignment. So yeah, with classical homeopathy, you must look at them as a whole person and what has led to that. You look at the men, like the ones that I see who have the health anxiety, something happened in their earlier life that rocked them. Maybe their uncle died of a heart attack or the neighbor died of cancer, and you're just a young, impressionable kid, and the neighbor was there one day and now they're gone, and what the hell, So it makes sense when you follow someone's whole life. In fact, I would say that as a homeopath, I've become so much more just compassionate and understanding about human beings, because everything makes sense. When you understand where someone's come from, what their parents were like, grandparents were like, it all makes sense. And we're just the product of, how we're going through life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you say that actually, because I was thinking, listening to your recent interview with Alec, I was actually thinking, because you were talking about miasms, which we'll get into in a sec, but then I kind of got confused between that and the constitutions, because we kind of figured out, like, your homeopath never says, oh, this is your constitutional remedy. But over time, like every now and then we'd go through our kit and, mum would just check if there's anything that's gone, like if the pills have gone off or whatever. Anyway, and I remember at one point we were looking over like probably years worth of remedies, and lots of mine were lycopodium at varying potencies. And we kind of figured, like, that must be a constitutional remedy for me, because after all the things I've seen her for, I'd often get given lycopodium. Sometimes it would just be lycopodium. Sometimes it would be that with something else. So, and I don't know, maybe you can say, I don't know what lycopodium's for exactly. But then listening to when you're talking about the miasms, it was funny because I was like, oh yeah, I kind of relate to that. And I could kind of relate to that. And then I was thinking about whether your constitution changes over your lifetime as well, because it makes total sense that you could, because as we change, that's always happening. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the debate comes in. Is there like an inherent little like seed within you that's always like the essence of who you are, or, do you change? And so that is completely and utterly the debate. But with lycopodium, I mean, I wouldn't pick lycopodium necessarily for you, but I'd have to see the whole case history. With lycopodium, they can definitely have a lot of fear of failure. It's a massive one with men, actually. It's probably one of the biggest prescribed remedies for men. And there's often a disconnect with the father, sort of figure for the men. And so they really struggle with their masculinity. So what they then tend to do is compensate, perhaps. And that might look like, it's almost like masking at work, and like on the outside looking like they've got it all together, but in the inside they're feeling like, low self-esteem, like not confident, and like really quite fearful of like, so they often have, sort of that imposter sort of syndrome kind of thing. And so, but their physical manifestations can be a lot of gut stuff, reflux stuff, some anxiety. I've had tradies who have like been in that state, and like they will throw up every day before work, and they just think it's like this normal thing, or they have like IBS type symptoms, but it's just around the nerves of going to school. But bear in mind, your homeopath who prescribed that to you, it's like you can have little elements of a remedy and not fit the totality at all. So like little things like that, like lycopodium, whatever it was prescribed to heal, whether it was anxiety or gut issues or, whatever, you can absolutely prescribe remedies without thinking that it's your totality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
it makes perfect sense.
I would hazard a guess that you would have a different, classical prescription, at the core, but whatever you were going through. And all homeopaths approach cases differently as well. So some do a lot more sort of superficial acute prescribing. I'm all for that, like the in between, but I think the government should make it mandatory for everybody to have a homeopathic consult once a year for your own health, maintenance, well-being, spiritual health. Get everyone you have to do that once a year. And, but I'll tell you like a random story about lycopodium that we were just chatting about in our academy. Yeah. And, the guy was a bikie actually. Now you can imagine like a lot of bikies, a lot of them didn't have like a firm father. This is why they go looking for like the brotherhood within that. And so inside they might be feeling maybe weaker and less confident, but then they seek out this more masculine, like, I'm part of this gang and feeling good. And, this guy came and he had, varicose veins was the issue. Now lycopodium has a big issue for the veins and vascularity. And this guy's like dropped his dax and like severe, varicose veins there. Now he was prescribed lycopodium in a super. And this is how powerful homeopathy is. People think sometimes it's like this superficial cold and flu and fever. This guy's varicose veins completely, the old ones that were bulging died off and his body made new vein circuits going through. So completely resolved that. So most people would think, your only option for something like that is to go and get your veins poisoned and stripped, do that little incision. But homeopathy energy can really move things when practiced right and when given the right potency. This is the thing I'm big on in homeopathy, and I've really learned this from Peter, but it's got to be strong enough to push the body to really heal it. Some homeopaths, they give it a little nudge and maybe people see like a bit of improvement. We are a lot more.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I know most kits that you get are like 30C potency. And I know with yours, I think from memory, they're all 200 in even the like first aid kits.
Yeah, some are 200. Some we've got a homochord. So our latest ones, a lot of them are Fibonacci homochords, which is a combination of like 10 different potencies in one bottle. And we just find them so effective,
Wow. That makes so much sense. So that whatever potency you need it's got to be in there.
Exactly. When you think of a radio, right? And you can sort of like turn that tuner, only one vibration is going to play at one time, but it depends which one you're tuned to as to what you're going to hear, but they can all coexist. All the radio waves are around, but you're just turning that tuner and then you hear it. The human body's, the human body's the same in terms of you have your own unique vibration. So 30C might be great for you. The old girl boss side, you might need 200C, but it's just because you're on a different frequency. And when you put them all in the bottle, the one that the person needs is what resonates and pushes that healing. So I think you're going to start to see more and more stuff coming out about homochords. It's definitely a new thing in homeopathy. Well, homochords aren't new, but us using them the way they are, that's new. So you'll hear more about it, I think.
That's awesome. And so, and for the audience, can you explain a little more about the potencies and, well, let's use that as an example. So why would something that's not as potent maybe work on someone but not on someone else, but then someone that needs more of a potency? Because from my understanding, the higher potency actually means it's more diluted, doesn't it?
Which so to the homeopath, And so you've got your lower potencies. I say lower because what it actually is a sine curve. And in, our academy, we sort of would really bust that myth that there's no such thing as like low or high. Everybody in the world simply is on a different resonance. And so what they need is individual based more on the sine curve. So the 6 might sit here, 200C here, 30C here. It's like, but the common potencies really are 6C, 30C, 200C, 1M, 10M, and then up. But the reason that that is like a bit of a myth is because if you survey homeopaths all around the world, they all favor different potencies that they like to use and the results they get. And so there is no uniform really approach in homeopathy that anybody can stand upon and say, this will do this and that will do that. It is completely individualized. So the idea, what you're aiming for with potency though, is that you need the artificial energy, right? This artificial disease picture to push the vital force, and it has to be just a little bit stronger than your vital force so that your vital force has to get stronger and push back. If you throw it a low ball, it bounces off. And we see this with patients. There was someone who had seen a homeopath and he'd had a booking every month for 12 months. He'd been seeing this homeopath for a year. And his first prescription was arsenicum album to resolve his issue. And it was only in a 30C. And he had no changes whatsoever. So that homeopath then said, okay, all right, we might try silica 30C. And he moved through all of these different remedies, all 30C for a year. He then came to Peter, gets his case taken. Peter says, it is arsenicum album. Peter gives it to him in a home accord, right? The combination of all these potencies in one bottle. The guy gets cured. So it's, you know, potency is important. It is. And homeopaths don't realize this enough. A lot of people think the art of homeopathy is only in finding the right remedy, but it's not.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And of course, that makes so much sense as to why it's so individual because, you know, some things are quite superficial. They come on acutely and they're quite superficial. Some are like the inherited stuff where it runs super deep. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense because I've been fighting this it's kind of like jock itch and this, whatever the cause of it is. It's, you know, some kind of fungal thing or whatever. It's situationally, it's been hot and humid here, but I think because I've tried all these different remedies, you know, for it, looking up in books, I don't know the dosage of probably around 30C. Most of them we have are 30C. Nothing has been helping. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I just need to find a better remedy, but it makes sense. And it would be a higher dosage because part of living here, we've come to learn, I mean, there's so much changeover and upgrading and going through different like death and rebirth in my life in the past couple of years that whatever it is that's coming up that's afflicting me, it's a physical manifestation of maybe something psycho-spiritual that's wanting to come off and help me like release and go into my higher potential. So I get an instinct that that's what's going on, which means I think there's probably a higher dosage or a different frequency or a combination that would help.
So we actually signed Isaac up to the Academy. Well, I don't know. We got an email. So you're looking for patients? And I was like, let's sign Isaac up for that.
Yes. And that's exactly it. Because even though the acute ones, so say lycopodium's a great one for that, sepia is a great one for that, there's certain remedies that have an affinity for it. But when you step back and you look at you, Isaac, as a whole, you know, your constitution, any griefs in your life, anything you've been through, even looking up from your ancestors, that can be a block to the more superficial acute prescribing. But then, you know, you have people accidentally taking like an acute remedy and just it happens to resonate so deep and they're like, whoa. So it really depends. But I would say if people do get stuck with, you know, an acute sort of prescription, stepping back, and that's when you want that 90 minutes of like everything about you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that definitely, that resonates.
Awesome. All right. So let's get into miasms because it's funny, again, known about homeopathy most of my life and we'd never really heard of miasms spoken about until recently because, again, there's lots more people speaking about homeopathy and it came up in a conversation and my mum actually asked me, what's a miasm? She thinks because I studied nutrition that I know everything about the human body and every scientific term. And I said, I'm not sure. And I looked it up and I explained it. And I was like, oh, that makes sense to me. But is a miasm something specific to homeopathy or is it just a concept that's applied to homeopathy?
I'm trying to think if I hear any other modalities talking about it. Actually, kinesiologists are trained to understand a little bit about miasms, but in general, I think it was born out of homeopathy and it was really this thing that Samuel Hahnemann was seeing in that he was giving the well-indicated remedy. So he'd taken the case and maybe the person in front of him needed belladonna why is it not working? And then he would look and he's like, there's something else energetic running in your body. And then he started to trace it back to the parents or the grandparents, usually just within those. So essentially, you know, we carry energetics, we carry trauma, unfortunately. When you look at the study with mice, this is the easiest one to explain to people to really understand what comes down family lines. But they did a study with mice where they would let them smell the scent of a cherry blossom and then they would electroshock them. And then they would do it again, let them smell the scent and then electroshock them. And over time, enough trauma, they smell the scent of the cherry blossom and they go into a mad frenzy because they know they're about to be shocked. But what they found is the offspring of those mice would smell the scent of the cherry blossom, even though they had never been shocked, they would go into a mad frenzy because they, you know, it was just trained into their cellular sort of memory. And the same goes for the next generation of mice. So it was their grandparents being shocked and yet they smelt that scent and reacted in absolute panic. Then in, you know, human sort of aspects, they have documented that the grandchildren of many of our prisoner of war victims, they had severe PTSD. So that trauma can exist coming down. I mean, just a random, like with my own cases, in some of my women who had severe panic disorders, so severe, and they had real gut issues, which makes sense. A lot of the time when you've got mental and emotional sort of like anxiety, panic, the gut is profoundly effective. These are the women who are saying, I can't eat this, that, da, 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 da. I'm allergic to everything. But a lot of the time, it actually just is their gut dysfunction because their mind is so busy. But these girls, I was curious about it. And it was a bunch of them that I was working with from the Middle East. And they would like faint in the grocery store. And it would be like, oh my God, like serious panic to the point where they just thought, I just shouldn't leave the house. And when I was tracing it back and you think, oh, Middle East, was there any fighting? But it wasn't. They were in Dubai. They've had a glorious life, very wealthy family, very well looked after. I've never had anything to stress about in my entire life. And when we went back, their parents and grandparents grew up in Lebanon. And this is in an era of get in the bunker, they're dropping bombs. And so for them, it was literally, they were acting as if bombs were being dropped, but they weren't. And a lot of people acknowledge this sort of trauma, right? Like you go through the panic, but then throughout life, that fear of the fright remains. So they're still stuck in that loop. And then, yeah, just acknowledging that that can come down family lines as well. But they had amazing healing with homeopathy. So, yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I know you've talked about before, even things like poverty, because like that, you know, poverty consciousness and that mindset, lack and scarcity, it can often be something that we've inherited down the lines. And even that can be treated with homeopathy.
Yeah. So some of our remedies have really quite a pessimistic sort of outlook. Like let's use our Arsenicum album as an example. They have often gone through some sort of event in their early life, or maybe they've had a parent who was overbearing or something, but they often grow up into our worry warts. So they are really financially worrying. And the source of their anxieties is almost all external about the world. So they can become quite controlling about, you know, everything in their life. And it's a byproduct of their internal anxiety, you know, that they try to control everything. But finances is another one. So just feeling constantly, we don't have enough. I've worked with people who have so much money, but that feeling is very lack. And the other one, you know, you can see it in the serenum. You know, it's just sort of like a dull down. These are not people who could take a risk in work and see what happens, you know, because it's like, boy, no, you know, finances. And, you know, we grow up with these programs. So if you're raised by a parent who is constantly worrying about money, of course, that's the program that you're going to have playing in your deep subconscious. But through the power of a well-indicated homeopathic remedy, it brings those up into your subconscious, into your conscious mind to actually look at and observe and say, is that even mine? And is that even true? But the problem is that people who don't have access to homeopathy or other modalities that perhaps could even try to do that, they are completely unaware. They think that that is reality. They don't know it's just a program that's running. So it's so amazing. But I would say too, with homeopathy, it is a matter of you take the remedy, yes, and all of the stuff comes up, but it's always up to the individual what they want to do with that. Some, if they wanted to, could push that back down and remain the same. I'd say homeopathy opens the door. It's always the person who walks through it. So say, for example, with the remedy carcinosin, it's like one of my top 3 most prescribed remedies. And not surprisingly, it has an affinity for cancer, which we know is rife in today's world. But with carcinosin, people tend to have a real lack of boundaries. They're people pleasers. They just go and go and go. They're often in toxic sort of situations, whether it's at work with like a boss who dominates them. They often grew up in a home where there was a lot of tension and unease. And so they've adapted in this way to try and keep the peace, right? I just want to keep everyone happy. But their nervous system is fired up, and then they can get really OCD, perfectionisty, and all sorts of physical manifestations. A lot will have eating disorders, missing periods, and it's all born out of this nervous system dysfunction. I'm not good enough and scary things from the outside. But when I give carcinosin to people, they so often are the ones to like quit their toxic job, leave a toxic relationship, do all of these like sort of drastic things because their vital force has been stimulated, and it says, we will no longer live this way. This is not healthy. We're not doing it. You're going to end up with a disease if you don't just leave. And it's like the vital force being so stimulated, it gives them that confidence and that knowing that like it's fine to leave. And so I've seen this so many times, and it's that remedy the most because they have that history of sort of domination and lack of boundaries. So powerful.
Yeah. Well, what about really chronic conditions? Like I was just thinking of my father with his rheumatoid arthritis. Is there anything with some patients or people that where things are kind of baked into the cake and it's too late? Like you're not going to be able to do anything with homeopathy for somebody who's had, surgeries and joints realigned and has been doing, the pharmaceutical route for so long that's just, they're keeping themselves alive, but it's still, the arthritis is just like twisting the joints and all that.
Yeah. So there are definitely remedies that we use for cases of rheumatoid arthritis, but it's in looking at certainly the longer that people have suppressed it and the more toxicity, it might be harder. It might just take longer to really be trying to uplift a lot of these layers that, people have added over their lifetime. But I'll give you an example of a nurse who had rheumatoid arthritis. And what was found is that she was never well since a smallpox vaccination that she got in order to be a nurse. She then suffered with chronic sinusitis, sinus issues, for which she took many, many, many rounds of antibiotics. But the other thing was like the creeping on of this rheumatism. And for her, the prescription of Thuya, it allowed she took that within a couple of days, like cheese thick stuff pouring out of her sinuses, and her rheumatism improved, like healed. So there's different causes for why people have rheumatism, but certainly it can be a familial aspect. And a lot of the time, that one was a case of, injury. But when you look at family lines that are prone to it, it often runs down with a miasm, and often there is trauma. It's like the somatization. It's the body is manifesting its emotional pain in the body. So, I'm at a healing center with a woman right now, a fasting center. And, we were just chatting by the fire, and she was sort of telling me her story. And as she's talking, it's natural for me to think, oh man, I would love to give you this remedy, and, I'm just thinking like so much about you is syphilitic, this miasm. And, she talked for quite a while. And then I said, in homeopathy, there is something that could like possibly help you. And, and I described the miasm to her and I said, it has a tendency to self-destruction. So things like deep depression, things like suicide. And I listed off a bunch of random things about the syphilitic miasm, including they're prone to even having twins. What a bizarre thing. Prone to being left-handed. It's a lot more common that they would be left-handed, and sometimes things like dyslexia, or it's like they're neurodivergent a lot of the time, not always. Anyway, I described this to her and she's like, oh my God, that's so crazy. She's like, my brother just committed suicide. I've got twins, and she sort of ran through like a lot of these other aspects, and it's, you can pick it, you can, oftentimes a lot of craving for alcohol that would indicate the syphilitic miasm. And so rheumatism, it's like there's an autoimmune component to it. And so when you look at the body flaring up almost in this self-attacking way, whether that's like diabetes, type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, you're sort of looking at why is the energy in this level of dysfunction of attacking itself. And trauma is just a huge one. And it can be, sometimes it's not even our own issues, it's that of our ancestors. So homeopathy is the best thing for recalibrating that.
Yeah. Is there any evidence with, I'm just thinking of the lineage back and some other healing modalities, energetic modalities that we've discussed on this show, where we've discussed if you heal an inherited trapped emotion, let's say, that it departs or heals generations back and forward. Is there anything like that going on with these miasms when they're cleared on an individual level and then back through a family?
Yeah. And you would see this a lot when you're working one-on-one with patients, that when the child is given a remedy, so they might have brought their child in for like behavioral issues, and they take this remedy and it just sets off, the mother, she might be physically healed of something or emotionally be absolutely like purging and offloading stuff. It's not uncommon for us to give the remedy to the grandchild, that when we've taken the case of the grandchild, and I've had this a couple of times so amazingly, and they will say to me that they were so much like their grandmother. They were so close to the grandmother. And, I had a little girl once, and the mum said to me, so she was having severe behavioral issues, and the mum said to me, this was about the 5th consult in, when we were really trying to crack the case and understand what's going on here. And she said, I got to tell you, Mel, it's so scary. She reminds me so much of my mum. And, she didn't like her mum. She's like, oh God, it's so awful. And I said, all right, tell me about your mum. And so she starts to tell me all of these things, and I could see commonalities in the behavior. But it was the remedy then that I prescribed for that this child completely transformed. Wow. So, and that mum says to me, she took that remedy, Alzheimer's, for like 6 months, I think, this child. And that mum sends me photos of her like all the time. She's just saying, this is a new daughter that I have met. But yeah, so I can't say that the granddaughter taking that, because I didn't follow up, to find out the relationship with the grandmother, but you can see it definitely, that it breaks those generational chains energetically, but I've only seen it, with the cases close to me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's so fascinating.
And I'd love to, I'm curious, because I know you used to work a lot with fertility, or people with fertility issues. Now, in terms of miasms, did you find that a lot of them were miasms, or is it more, because obviously fertility issues have exploded, especially in the last 5 years, but even before, I would say it's interesting, because what I've noticed is my generation, I feel like I personally know lots of young girls, when I was in my adolescent years, that literally got their period and they got put on the pill straight away. And years later, when I started to learn more about health, I used to think, that's got to be messing with their hormones and fertility issues, because now it's so common that women my age, and I'm in my early 30s, it's just common. Like, they're all freezing their eggs. They're all, if they're in relationships and wanting to have kids, they're going through IVF. Like, it's just become the norm. And so it always makes me curious, is it a product of more of a toxic load, more of these synthetic drugs, or in your experience, have you found that it's also miasms at play?
Both. Definitely both. And it's the pharmaceuticals made it a lot worse, because I think adding in those toxic layers, because our parents started using drugs, pharmaceuticals, and they were messing with their own bodies. Then when they've given birth, we're getting a slightly distorted energy already. But a lot of us were given routine antibiotics and, drugging going out. People get a lot of vaccinations. It's a lot for our body to deal with. So we've been pushed into these heavily miasmatic states. It's definitely a bit of a crisis, and it's not getting better. If you look at sperm, since 2000, it's dropping off like 2% per year. Like, where does this end? Really, it's going to take some serious overhaul. But yeah, and it's a devastating, thing for people to go through, like working one-on-one with people. It's easy when people throw around these stats and facts and they say, 1 in 6 couples. It's definitely more than 1 in 6, but the WHO wants to keep saying it's 1 in 6. So, okay, will struggle to conceive. But when you think about the real impact of that, or PCOS or endometriosis, it's a mess, absolute mess that people need to be restored from. So in the fertility protocols, things that we do detox things like the oral contraceptive pill, because the great majority of people were on it. Hopefully we're going to see that less. I hope our generation was the one to get burned by this, and the, mums now coming through and not going to let their kids so easily do that sort of thing. But yeah, we need to help even all of these women with endo, like horrific pains that they're going through. And we can, but it takes, like commitment, taking the remedies, doing the healthy lifestyle things, being mindful of what you eat and inject into your body. These sorts of things are all important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. We just did an episode recently talking about German new medicine, and that's another, it's not a modality. It's just a framework that can help people to understand the mind-body connection. And it's just funny you just brought up endometriosis, because my sister-in-law had it, and it wasn't something that she, as far as she knows, it's not genetic. It just kind of popped up in her mid to late 20s. And so probably mid 20s. She's late 20s now, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. And it was just kind of, she was a bit blindsided. And recently we looked up what it means in German new medicine. And it's just because I just always look at that with curiosity. I'm not, it's nothing to follow with dogma, but it's very interesting because I don't think I've ever looked up anything from the German new medicine aspect that is not going on in the psyche. It's so, so interesting. And then again, that's what I love about, because German new medicine, I say, is one of those things that it's really best integrated with other healing modalities, and something like homeopathy works so well because quite often these conflicts in German new medicine can also be inherited. Like, they're these conflicts that are sort of passed down. And so it's really interesting. And I actually wanted to ask, so in fertility, when you see miasms, just out of curiosity, what do the miasms tend to be like from the previous generations?
So there was some severe infectious diseases type things like STD, stuff like that. So we've got the cancer miasm. So if I go the 5 most common, cancer, tuberculosis was huge. So the people who have the tubercular miasm, usually they have an ancestor who had tuberculosis. It was probably treated medically, so suppressed, but it doesn't change the energy of that sort of infection here. So the children and the grandchildren often struggle with asthma, eczema. They can be allergic to everything, those sorts of tendencies. And then the psychotic one is around gonorrhea and all of the manifestations of that. So with that, you see a lot of that in infertility. You see it with a lot of like STD. It's like the energetic resonance of the reproductive organs, especially in a woman, have got dysfunction going on. And because often, the other people were treated. And so these women, they're going through all their IVF testing and they're being told there's no infections, it's fine. But that energetic resonance is still there and it's impeding their fertility. So you clear that and it goes. Now, the power of these remedies, when you look at something like HPV, the human papillomavirus, this is huge. So people who have like a lot of warts, it's obviously, you know, that virus. And when you give the homeopathic remedy, people can and literally they take the drops under the tongue and then the warts turn black and fall off. And that is a really good symbolism of healing from within. But a lot of women these days, they go for their pap smears and they're getting abnormal smear tests. And so the doctor says, you need to come back every 6 months. It's not good. You know, there's something dysplasia, there's something not right. And through homeopathy, this is where it's that psychotic miasm. Something there is in dysfunction. It's in overdrive, and it can just be, you know, HPV driving it. So that's a remedy that a lot of women need to know. Like, it's wonderful at unlocking things there. The other ones are the psoric miasm. This is a lot of skin, and it's your most sort of like superficial, not destructive, to be honest. The goal for people should be to get back to the psoric miasm where it's not severe, you know, like heart attacks, all of these neurological degenerative MS, you know, ALS, all of the depth of like destructive things going on. Your psoric is really like the simplest one. And then the syphilitic, which is syphilis at the core, but that energy distortion coming down family lines.
Yeah. The psoric one, is that like psoriasis? Is that kind of a
it can be
in the name? Okay.
Yeah, definitely could be. I don't know whether they named that on purpose, really similar, but definitely a lot of people with psoriasis. Psoriasis can also be under the syphilitic though, because it is quite an autoimmune component in it. It's typically characterized as that, compared to eczema, which is not necessarily so autoimmune. It's more like allergic reaction constitution. So yeah, but there is a bit of crossover between every miasm as well. And people don't often fall into just one, you know. We're usually quite mixed, multi-miasmatic, but in some people, you've got one blatantly exposed miasm that I just could spot it like so clear. So yeah, we usually clear a couple of layers with people. Definitely in fertility, miasmatic clearing is huge.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, especially when I find that a lot of things can come up when you're preparing to have children from the generational things. It's like you're getting ready to pass on, you know, that more of that generational, you know, that ancestral line. And so things like actually will come up at that time. So it's really, really interesting. Another thing I want to touch on, because I know that obviously you're very well aware of Isaac Golden, as are we. That was one of because my mum got into homeopathy through sort of getting into all the vaccine stuff, because I was vaccine injured as a child, and then mum researched and realized I'd had pretty severe reactions. And through all of that research, she found homeopathy because Isaac Golden was big in that community for doing the vaccine detoxes. So I wanted to ask if that's something you've worked with, and more specifically, I'm curious to know if there's been a lot of vaccine detox around the COVID vaccine in the last few years, because I know I did a vaccine detox in my early childhood before my teen years. And that was for all my childhood vaccines. But I'm curious with the COVID vaccine because of, you know, I mean, it's the mRNA and everyone's like, it's the worst one and all this stuff. But again, it's all just energy. So have you worked with that much?
So a little bit in my, you know, fertility, I would need to do that. I don't specialize in it, but I always just treat the person in front of me. And if that's the issue, then definitely I will do that. I've seen profound results with a lot of people doing that. In regards to the COVID one in particular, I'll tell you one story. Do you know the Woodford Folk Festival? Have you heard of that? Well, yeah. So it's like a pretty big festival in Australia. And as homeopaths, we get invited there to work, but we get to go there for free. But and we treat the festival goers, and they get to walk in, they get free treatment. And there was a doctor who came in there, and he had done all sorts of testing and treatments and all of these things to try and reverse damage from the COVID vaccine. And he was given the specific COVID isode for the vaccine that he got, so Pfizer, and given that and said, take this, you know, come back tomorrow, get some more, and just see how you go. So after his consult, he, went and he came back the next day, made a massive donation because he said, in only one day, you have done more for me than any of these other modalities. So triggering healing, that was only one day, the improvement there. But yeah, remarkable things happen, a lot with a lot of children, taking those toxic layers off. It's phenomenal. So yeah, I'll tell you a story. When I took one vaccine detox remedy, it was called Gardasil. So this is our HPV vaccine that women get when we're around like 15, 16, I think, at school. And I'd never had issues from that vaccine that I knew of. And, I had my children fine, and it's nothing I ever really thought of. But one day I was making it up for a fertility client who had a severe reaction to it. And I was like, yep, let's detox it just to be sure it's not causing any lingering issues. And I decided to take a dose at the same time as I was making it up for her. And the next morning I woke up and I was pulling on my nightgown and I was like, oh, my arm. And I said to my husband, oh my God, it feels like I've just had and I was like, oh my God, my arm was like numb. It was dead at the injection point. And I, naturally I'm running through, did I do any exercise yesterday? How have I pulled this isolated little muscle here? And when I was speaking to Isaac Golden, that week, I said, this has happened. And he says, it's not uncommon. And when I messaged my sister to say, you're not going to believe what has just happened. And she said, don't you remember how sore our arms were when we got them? And I said, no, I don't remember that at all. And she was like, nah, we had dead arms for, that day and day after. I was like, oh my gosh. Wow. And so in homeopathy, there is this power of what we call the return of old symptoms. It's the healing trajectory that people go through. And so when we give them a well-indicated remedy, let's say we are giving carcinosin. Now, your carcinosin patients, they usually did have Epstein-Barr virus, monoglandular fever. Almost, a lot, at least 80% of the time they did. And so, and they might have had a history of eczema that they, suppressed with some steroid creams, and maybe, some anxiety or some grief. Now, with this return of old symptoms, when we give them the well-indicated remedy, they then will say to us, oh my gosh, my tonsils are swelling up. I feel like I'm getting sick. Maybe they have a history of recurrent tonsillitis too, is very common. And it's like they feel like it's coming back, but they're like, it's not fully manifested. It's not pussy or anything, but I can feel it. But they will see that eczema come back up as well. They will feel all of these emotions purge back up. Now, with this return of old symptoms, what your body is very intelligently doing, it's going back through all of your unresolved issues. So, you might not have active tonsillitis right now, but your history of suppressing all of the issues going on there, it's not completely back to normal. And so the remedy, does that and it heals all of these areas. I had a woman and she had a tumor cut out, cancerous, in her neck. And when she started taking her carcinosin for the first time ever, and this was 10 years ago, she had the tumor removed, that it was fully spasming and doing all of this bizarre stuff. And she's like, oh my gosh. I said, it's just the energy of what was going on in that area that led to the tumor. It's just resolving things. You're fine. And it passes usually quite quickly. But yeah.
Wow.
Powerful.
That's amazing. So incredible.
And the body has it has a very particular, hierarchy of the way that it likes to heal. So it likes to push things from the inside, any disturbance from the inside, it likes to push to the outside. So things like asthma might turn into eczema as it's healing because you're pushing the distortion of energy out onto the skin. The skin is the most superficial but safest place for you to have a disease state. The thing that we do wrong, unfortunately, is we have a skin condition and we go, oh my gosh, no, something's wrong. I've got this rash on my skin, and we go and get these toxic creams to push it in. But then we manifest internal distortions because you're not curing when you're suppressing. And so it always leads to the body needing another outlet of expression. And so the more that you suppress, let's say the eczema is a characteristic one. You've got eczema. you put the steroid creams on, then mum says, oh, now the kid's got asthma. And then the child starts taking, the puffer every day, or taking even oral steroids. And then they go, now their behavior, they're being aggressive, all these things. It's because the progression of expression, it's just been lockdown. And then we end up, usually the last place is like severe mental health, where the organism, it doesn't even maybe want to be here. That's the obviously latest stage. They're not cognitive anymore. So we've got to be mindful of that, just as individuals in the world, that, is a rash really that bad? Eczema can be really gnarly. So you definitely want to see a homeopath and get that resolved. But I think we're living in a culture and a generation now that just wants everything to look perfect and be perfect all the time. They think there's something wrong if your teenager has a bit of acne, and they go, oh, what can I do? And so they go on hardcore drugs for acne. And it's like, they're just going through puberty. Their hormones are just working themselves out. Give them a year. We need to just normalize like being a little bit sick, having a flu here and there, coughing your guts up, get all your phlegm out. It's good. It's detoxifying, but we're so scared of just letting the body do what it wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you always talk about that with homeopathy, is that it's not the suppression of symptoms, it's just helping the process along. And so that's why sometimes it will get worse before it gets better, because you're just basically speeding up the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think homeopathy is so empowering for people, because especially with, because I do social media management for the Australian Vaccination Risks Network. And sometimes, we get mums reaching out and asking like what they can do for vaccine reactions with their young children. And we can't give medical advice. But I always say to them, go and look into homeopathy. Because it is quite well known that they can do the vaccine detoxes. And just knowing, because I know for like a lot of these parents, often they've gone against their better judgment in giving the kids their vaccines, and then they've had the reactions. And quite often it's this feeling of like, oh my God, what have I done? And they feel like they've done something irreparable. But homeopathy kind of, gives that power back. And it is all about empowering the person to, like you said, you're opening the door, and then it's their choice whether they want to go through or not. And I love it. And actually something just popped into mind too on the vaccine detox thing. Have you worked with many people like with autism? Is homeopathy something that can be used with autism?
So if you read the book Impossible Cure by Amy Lansky, she was a, very mainstream sort of science minded. So she's got her PhD. She worked for NASA, and so did her husband. And she's written a brilliant book detailing her experience of her son's diagnosis with autism and using homeopathy to heal that. So now she's obviously a big advocate for homeopathy. But yes, it absolutely, yes. But a lot of my practice has not been that. So Sarah Valentini from the Family Apothecary, she teaches in our academy our students all of the ins and outs of these sorts of things, because there's a lot of complex kids coming through, and you've sort of got to approach them a little bit differently to just that one remedy in its totality. It's a much more layered approach. Clear the steroids, clear the vaccines, clear a bunch of different things, and then see what's left. So she's amazing. But people doing amazing work in that sphere. And with the mums, I just want to touch on it because it's something I've seen a lot, people who regret medical interventions that they've had. And the reality is you only know, and you've done what you've done up until this point, for whatever reason you felt that it was necessary. And I've had so many parents bawl their eyes out to me. I've had so many women trying to get pregnant who are struggling so hard, and they are full of regret and guilt and all of these things. And I just so wish I could take that away, and just for people to realize it's not their fault. It's this systemic, government and everyone who has hidden what they could have used instead. And on the individuals who are dealing with this, they really need to take remedies, even with parents. That's why so often with like kids who are going through issues, we say, you got to treat the parents, because their guilt and their grief, it's actually negatively impacting their child. We need that parent to have full self-forgiveness, full, understanding of like, this is just my life. This is just my journey. Everything's okay. And that opens up for new potentials going forward. But definitely there are remedies like Hydrastis ignatia, a lot of the remedies that kids need, the parents need as well. So, do you know PANS and PANDAS, those sort of strep related illnesses? I don't know if you guys have seen a lot of it, but it can manifest with like some serious neurological and behavioral and anxiety things with kids. And a lot of the time it's a suppression of emotions. And so you give it to the mum to take alongside their child, and they can both move this emotional load at the same time. So,
that's beautiful.
Because when you think about it, we have a field, and especially the connection between parents and their children, mothers, even I would say slightly more, your field is so strong. So women can go through something like, I'll give you an example, birth trauma can be so horrific for some women. And they can end up in what we call a staphysagrian state. They need the remedy staphysagria. Their body was violated, they were dominated, and they get left feeling so angry and so resentful that it ends up looking sometimes like postpartum depression, like they're just not coping, they're full of rage, and then they start to lock down. The anger usually goes down into just a deep depression. They can't cope. But it was all because of this experience where she's in her most vulnerable state giving birth, So unfortunately it's quite common, but because her field is such a strong thing and she's often breastfeeding this baby, you often see those babies start to manifest the symptoms of the staphysagria. So things like premature dental decay. And you look at these like really young kids and you're like, why are their teeth rotting out? They eat perfectly. Everything's done right. Why are their teeth like this? And it's that sort of, field. And that tips you off that to treat the child, you can give that, but also to look after the mum, because people can stay with that suppressed state for 20 years. Definitely have worked with people over 20 years, but people for 20 years who are stuck in that energy, and they've gone to psychologists every week trying to get it up and out. And because they're so angry, a lot of sexual abuse as well. And they're just trying to move it, and they can never just get over it. But the homeopathy sets them free because the energy moves out, and they might remember the experience, but it does not give them that visceral gut clenching feeling anymore. And they just say, oh my God, I'm free. So powerful.
It's incredible.
Man, there's so much to it. There's so much value just in this episode. I'm so pumped because I can think of so many people that this is going to help, and I'm going to send this to afterwards, family members, friends. And I'm just imagining with RMDY Collective and with your the homeopathic school and the training, that once people start finding out all the amazing things that you can do with this and where it leads, where it's going, that you guys must be just booked out, for your students and all that. How many times a year do you guys go through? Do you guys have like one class that just starts and goes through the whole thing, or do you have more openings throughout the year?
At the moment, we are doing just a cohort every 2 years. So our next intake is September 2026. But that's sort of because this is our first round. We're getting all of that groundwork laid and sort of done, perfectly. And because we have such a massive cohort, I would not want to do another intake until I've seen it through completely and just sort of know like everything. But probably subsequent enrollments, we would get to the point where we do it yearly. But I think with our like training centers they're going to be healing centers, but our reason for doing them is really for students to come and sharpen their skills, to work with the community, just keep under the guidance of professional homeopaths. Because when you train to be a homeopath, I did my education. I did one at Endeavour, and then I did the bachelor's in the UK. And it helps so much to have a mentor. Like I wouldn't have been half as successful as I was as a homeopath if I didn't have Peter. He just took me under his wing from the get-go. And so everything that he has taught me, I have gone leaps and bounds. And because a lot of these people who are the mentors, they're in their 60s or older, they've got so much information to share. The problem is that a lot of them, they are getting to an age of either retirement or, out of here, and it's not been passed on to the new up and comers. And that's what I think is so important, is this handover, passing the baton on so that we can continue to thrive as an industry. And I don't want the students to have to figure all of that out on their own. And so, keeping that just constant education going is really important to me. But I think you're right that when this catches on like massive, right? Like mainstream massive, because I would imagine this healing center we've got in Springfield being built right now, it will become well known in the community. I imagine it will be booked out very quickly, because the reality is people with eczema will walk in, and after a couple of months, they will no longer have eczema. And they tell people, everyone tells people. And so it's just swirling up huge. And so all I want to make sure is that, we can keep opening up these other centres in, New South Wales, Victoria. They're the next two in Australia that we've got our sights on. Just having that ready for people, because you guys would know, you look around the world right now and it can be pretty dire, really, when you look at how sick and sad we are as a population. Right. And we just got to get back on track. And I think homeopathy is a critical pillar of how we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such perfect timing, because I think after these last 4 or 5 years, it's really primed people to take responsibility for their health. And I think people have gotten to the point where they've tried everything in the medical system, they've gone down that route, and they see that it doesn't work or it doesn't last. They might get initial results, but it doesn't last. So I think it's just such perfect timing. And I remember when we were at the Remedy Social, and, at the end of the night you did your speech and you were talking about even how you got this building and how everything just felt so divinely guided. And I just remember listening thinking, this woman is so on purpose. Like, you are just on this mission and nothing's going to stop you. And I mean, I think, what has just in this first intake of students, like the fact that you've had over almost 600 students enroll, I think I've got cold shivers now just saying this, but I think that is your, that divine confirmation that you are on the right track. And I just see this exploding.
For sure. And it's long overdue, right? And so now probably let's chat on the history just quickly. But when we look at the history of homeopathy, only just over 100 years ago, we had across the US over 100 homeopathic hospitals. And some of these hospitals, absolutely huge. We're talking 3,000 beds. People were sort of being committed there for, severe, schizophrenia, bipolar. A lot of them were sort of like asylums almost to look after people, and they did gorgeous things. They're not only homeopathy, but they would be out in the sun. They'd be encouraged to garden. They were so much more switched on back then than our hospitals now. And, you had hospitals in New York, in Washington, and they, Massachusetts, in Ireland, all of that. And they were dedicated to the practice of homeopathy only. That's all they did there. Now, in those days, there were a lot of, epidemics floating through: Spanish flu, scarlet fever, cholera, things that back then would have taken people out, because we didn't have the drugs that we have now. But back then, when you compare the mortality rates from the allopathic hospitals that were largely using aspirin and whatever other toxic things they were doing versus the homeopathic ones, the mortality rates are unbelievable for how effective homeopathy was. And that's all documented, by the doctors. There was a doctor back then, and he was still training, but in part of his job was he was writing and delivering medicines to people, and he worked for both the homeopaths and the allopaths. He was just delivering medicines door to door. And he said it was the most remarkable thing to witness, because all the people that I was delivering homeopathy to lived, and the others didn't. And, he went on to study, but it's just, an amazing thing. And so when you look at these hospitals and what they had going, and you just fantasize about what we could recreate in the world now, as a parent, that makes me feel so secure to know that I've got a place to go always where my children will be seen and cared for. And I would view it as the first line of defense for all things. But your serious emergencies, your surgical traumas, all of that, let our hospitals that exist now do what they are good at, which is save your life in a serious emergency. But the problem is they are weighed down and they're not coping. Man, I talk to so many nurses and doctors. They're not coping with the weight of chronic disease. But we've become, so chronic disease laden because we're not dealing with the mental and emotional traumas. You look at the obese person in that ward, there's hundreds of them getting their limbs cut off because they've got diabetes, because they couldn't change their life. But if you were to sit down with that person, because no one wants to get their foot cut off, but if you ask them what was going on, what has led you down this path, and if they were cared for as a child, as a teenager, and taught how to connect to their body and feel good in their body, we wouldn't abuse it. We wouldn't use drugs and alcohol and all the things that we do now, because we would have gotten to the root of the problem and we could have all thrived. And I think that some people think that, we can't all be thriving and we can't all be happy and we can't all be successful. And I just don't think that's true. I think that's something that we've been conditioned to believe, that health is for a lucky few, abundance and freedom and good relationships, that's for a lucky few over there. Not everyone gets to have those things. And I think inherently as humans, yes, we can, but we need to remember how to cultivate it and just really get much more community minded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting because just thinking about where things fell off from the homeopathic hospital days. And I know in the States, there was one man in particular, I think he was a homeopathic doctor and a senator, and he fought really hard to make it so that homeopathy would remain legal and affordable and accessible. But it hasn't really progressed super far beyond, like I said, the little things that people buy at the grocery store or whatever. But where it's going now, I see it doesn't have to be hundreds and hundreds of years before we get to this state. And there is no utopia, but when we start taking this collective actions and the word spreads, that ripple spreads, I see so many things changing, including the fundamental way that we approach disease and the fundamental way that we approach raising our children and thinking about this, to where I think it's going to be in one generation even, we can see a completely unrecognizable reality.
You even look at the number of homeschoolers and people who are just rebelling against the old sort of ways that we were told you have to do things. Certainly in health, we've got that entire paradigm upside down, in that world. And it's only a matter of time. But I do believe, like you, that it's not going to take all that long. Frankly, I don't think we've got that long to turn this around before, other agendas sort of converge. And I think people can feel that. And I think that's why so many people are taking action, because they're fed up. They want to be a part of this new world. So a lot of people are, getting in on it. They're not just sitting back and thinking, someone else will do it or someone else will change it. They're like, it could be me. I could be the one in my community leading and helping people. And I think, if you just look I guess cosmically, universally, I think the people who are being born now, who are here, and the children that are coming through with us, it's all by design, I think, anyway, that we're all here, we'll be in the right place at the right time, we'll just choose the right thing. But it's very much a humanity type thing. Like when I even look at the Bible, even though I love, the Bible, I wouldn't say I'm religious, and definitely not dogmatic, but I look at those principles in there and I think that's what's going to really pull us through, looking after each other, forgiveness, no judgment. And that's where the vibration really just goes vavoom. But really at the core of it, all down to vibration. And you look in the Bible, all the things that it says about our faith and what we can do as human beings when we have faith and we try to create. It's like we would be unstoppable,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've just hit the tip of the iceberg with that at this point in time. So I'm so excited for the future, and I'm so grateful for people like you, Melissa, because you're just such a pioneer in this field at this time, and it's so amazing what you're doing. Just let our audience know where they can get involved, because you've got a few things going at the moment now.
So for things like first aid kits, if anybody wants a kit in their home that they want to learn to use, you would go to remedycollective.com. And you can see all of our mini courses even on there. You know, we've got one called Welcome to the Revolution. So that's got me teaching first aid. We teach about some of the classical presentations for men and women. We talk about children's remedies, the complex children. So Sarah Valentini teaches there. And we've got Isaac Golden in there. We're actually doing the last module this week. So yeah, you can do short courses like that to learn to look after yourself and your family. I do most of my sort of stuff on Instagram where I teach, you know, people publicly. But then there's RMDY Academy, which is our 2-year program for anybody who wants to be a homeopath. So no prerequisites. We've got tradie guys who signed up. One of them is even my husband. He was just like really wanted to do it. But it's paced in a way that it's so flexible for people to live their life and get these things done. It's got enough like live and community aspects that it makes this sort of flexible international learning. We got people from all over the world. So it's like they're all so connected and held. And at the same time, they can be a mother and studying at night when the kids are in bed or just in stolen moments. It's not rigid. So,
and it's not the academic rigor of medical school. And I think that's amazing, because what my experience with that was 2 years we condensed into 6 weeks in my Army medical training. And it's possible. I'm like, holy smoke. So they take what we did in 6 weeks, they take it over 2 years, and then they make it really stressful. And then, you know, we obviously ours was stressful too, but imagine that. And then 10 years. And then after 10 years of all that training, they're getting the results they're getting now. It's, you know, small treatment. Yeah.
We literally in our academy had this talk because the other two senior like directors who are with me, so they're Peter and Jean, they've been involved in homeopathic education for over 30 years. And so they can see that a lot of courses, we're just pumping out this same old thing, write an essay on this, do an assignment on that, and testing. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily produce good homeopaths. So we just completely went against the grain and said, we are just going to do what we think will graduate the best homeopaths ever. And it's more of an apprenticeship style. These students watch us take cases from the get-go. They watch us ask questions. So they're emulating us when they start taking their cases. So they submit a portfolio at the end where they've taken cases and they show us what they did. And we say, tick, you're good to go out in the world. We can see that you get it. There's no written assignments. Like, I can't tell you the number of assignments I've written over the years that just fluff and didn't give anything for my like academic. All it did was show me that, yeah, okay, I had the discipline to sit down and force myself to do something, but I don't think it's necessary to graduate people who are strong. And just to see, like, we've got some who's like some of the oldest people in our course might be like late 60s and they're getting through it fine. Like, it's so awesome to me. I think it's such just general, easy knowledge to understand. And if you're someone who's metaphysically inclined about like mental, emotional, physical, spirit, like you're keen on health, but also psychology, it's so easy to absorb. It's like not even like study. So
yeah, I think that's the best way to teach it. You've got to be doing it, because I can totally relate to that. Studying nutrition, you just, you know, you learn the thing, you regurgitate it in an assignment, don't retain any of it. And to put it into practice, I think as you're learning it, that's hands down the best way to learn.
Yeah, real learning. Yeah. For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Absolutely loved this conversation. And yeah, we just want to help spread the word about homeopathy. The course is on my to-do list. I don't know when I'm going to get time to do it, but it's good knowing that it's every 2 years, because I'm like, yeah, hopefully 2026 rolls around and I'll be prepared to do it. But
maybe we'll both be in there. I don't know. I'm getting the itch for it.
I think, I mean, even if, because I don't even know if I'd want to practice, but I'd want to do the whole course so that I can just like off the top of my head go, yep, that's the remedy you need. Like I love that. And I just love to learn. And, you know, I think this can be applied in so many different ways because we actually met someone at one of our local markets. We do markets on the weekend with Isaac's products. And we actually met a lady and got to talking, and we were talking about being at the event. She said, oh, I was at the Remedy Social. I'm doing her course right now. And I was like, we were there.
Awesome.
And everyone will, and I've seen all the testimonials on your Instagram that you post, like everyone that I've either spoken to or have seen that is doing it is absolutely loving it. And when I think about all these different types of people, like you used to kind of specialize in fertility, there's going to be so many people that are going to specialize in different things and see different people. And that's how that ripple effect happens. So I'm super excited for it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, guys, for having me on all the chats. I love it.
Yeah,
thank you.
So great speaking to you. And I can't wait to see what you and your energy vortex is going to accomplish next. It's impressive.
Thank you, guys.
So I know everyone's going to be lining up around the world to go to this training program to learn to be homeopaths now. We're going to have thousands and thousands of homeopaths in every country, right?
Well, that's the goal. Like I'm actually waiting for this round to finish so that we have this like army of homeopaths that we have access to.
Yeah. Well, I just can't wait for the generational stuff got me the most excited.
Yeah.
If enough people, I think we're going to hit a point where so many people have used homeopathy and then the other techniques and stuff that we've talked about for clearing trapped emotions and things like that. Just imagine when enough people hits that tipping point to where I think we're going to affect some rapid, beautiful changes in this world.
Well, I think that's one of the things I love so much about homeopathy. Anyone that knows me and knows, you know, the modalities and the things that I work with, I love things that can be applied to multiple things or anything. So Psych K is like that. Human design is like that. Homeopathy is like that. Like it's such a great
code.
Yeah, it's such a great adjunct to so many other things, including conventional medicine. Like it also can meet you where you're at if you're not ready to completely exit that system.
And you know what I'm also really, really excited about is the potential, because you don't need to go to 10 years of medical training and then all this stuff to help you. If you're one of these people that loves helping people like me, I'm just a helpful guy. Somebody breaks something, somebody injured, I like to help them feel better and give them the tools or whatever treatments to get better. But instead of siphoning those people off and putting them into like the medical establishment and keeping them stuck in the allopathic pharmacopoeia world, putting them into a world where it's helped set people free, but also gives them a way to make an income for their families. And I'm thinking of so many different people that I know that might be interested in this, that have kids that are now looking at natural remedies and also need an income or want something to create a freedom income for yourself and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone that is interested in going through the training, which the next intake, I believe Melissa said, is September 2026. So next year, head to RMDY Academy. The link's in the show notes. So you can, I think, register your interest before then. And of course, if you'd like to purchase any remedies, kits, or short online courses, head to RMDY Collective. That link is also in the show notes, along with our code NaturalAF10, which will get you 10% off across the site. So definitely enjoy those. And you can connect with Remedy and Melissa on Instagram. Those links are in the show notes also. And yeah, Melissa does a lot of free teachings on her Instagram, which I also love. So yeah, she often will talk about some of the remedies or just what they're up to. And yeah, they've got a lot going on and just absolutely love it. Love supporting them and spread the word. Like, please share this episode with anyone that you think may benefit from it, especially if they're going through something right now health-wise that they really need support with. I think a lot of people, especially that have never tried homeopathy, will be pretty amazed by the results that they can get.
Absolutely. Yeah. We both have had really good results with it, from time to time. I'm really excited about looking into the higher potencies and seeing about clearing up some stuff, but,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've had some pretty incredible experiences with homeopathy. I did one of my most profound experiences. I had a systemic candida infection like throughout my whole body. So going back quite a few years ago now, and I did a full protocol. I think it was a 6-week protocol with homeopathics as well as a dietary. There were dietary requirements where I had to cut out all sugar, and it was pretty strict, but never ever had a candida infection ever in my life since, including just smaller infections like things like thrush or like skin things. It's never come back. And that's what I love about homeopathy. It actually is treating the root cause, and so that it doesn't keep reoccurring.
Yeah. And I've told my story several times, but yeah, just dealing with eczema. Never had any issues with eczema. Then it came up, and right away I knew it was emotional. And the fact that it's emotional and you can deal with it with homeopathy just makes sense now, like why that works.
And then, of course, I talked about on my episode talking about my explant surgery.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing too.
Yeah, I used homeopathy post-surgery instead of antibiotics, and absolutely fine, no infections whatsoever at any stage of my like post-surgery.
That's gonna ruffle some feathers, right, docs, right,
yeah.
surgeons.
But again, I think that's just another perfect example of how
they make it sound like you'll die, like you're definitely gonna die.
Yeah, no.
If you don't do the antibiotics. I thought you were gonna die.
Yeah, you were stressing out. But I think it's just such a good example to show how it can be used as an adjunct, even with conventional medicine. Like sometimes surgeries are unavoidable, or you have to go to, the emergency ward because, you've had some severe trauma. And that's where I believe conventional medicine has its place. And so to have something like homeopathy that can just really support you through that, and, maybe detox from medicines or vaccines or whatever it may be, it's really, I feel like there's just such a plethora of applications that that homeopathy can be used for.
Well, I was talking to a lady this weekend, and she was talking about this new hybrid mosquito that Bill Gates is trying to release in Australia. And and granted, I don't want that freaking mosquito anywhere. I think Bill Gates should be thrown in prison for doing crimes against humanity for shit like that. But I'm also not that worried about it, because I know that you can take that little poison diabolical mosquito, turn it into a homeopathic remedy, and clear all the shit that they're trying to do to us. So let's just keep interrupting their plans. I love it.
Yeah.
We're just going to get inside their OODA loop. If you're familiar with that term, we're going to get inside their OODA loop and just cycle faster than they can pump out poisons and just fix stuff on a scale that they can't even keep up with.
Yeah. Well, I actually had so many more questions after we interviewed Melissa, and look, we might have to get her on again at some point in the future, because after my surgery, another homeopath friend of ours actually said to me that she could make a remedy from my breast implants. And I had never even thought of that. And I was like, I guess. She's like, yeah, you can make a remedy from anything. It's the energy of it. And I would have loved to have asked Melissa some more questions about that. And I guess, the limitations, or if there are any limitations to what you can make a remedy from. It's so fascinating. Anyway, I could literally talk about homeopathy for hours.
I wonder if they have a circumcision remedy.
Oh, that's a good question.
Really good energetic thing. Because we're just listening to Alex Zech's show mentioning that. And it's like, it doesn't really seem to affect me that much, but I'm sure it does on a subconscious level.
Yeah. But, and different men have different experiences at different points throughout their life. So it's one of those things that it happens at such a young age that I think it's pretty buried pretty deep in the subconscious mind. So yeah. It's like homeopathy, the world is your oyster.
Hope is alive. How I feel. Yep.
Anyway, super exciting. Please share this episode with anyone that you feel will get value out of it. Like and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, and drop us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode, and if you have any questions. If you do have questions, please submit them, because if we get enough, I'm definitely going to ask Melissa to come back on, and we'll ask all your questions for you.
Yeah. And if you want to support the show monetarily, we definitely appreciate that, because this is a listener-supported show. We don't post other brands ads. We don't get revenue from reading ads on the show. We never will. If you're on Rumble, I'm trying to figure out how to shut the ads off. So I apologize if you're on Rumble and you watch our videos and you see ads. I don't want any of that. I don't want any of their money for any of that. But you can support our show at naturalartform.com. Go check out our remedies there. I'm constantly updating the website and tweaking things and trying to make it just a really effective way to communicate what we're doing. So
and
check
use
it out,
the code,
share it with your friends and family. We appreciate you guys so much.
And use the code
best support.
And use the code NaturalAF10 at checkout for 10% off, no matter how many times you order. That's as a listener, you get a lifetime discount.
Cool. Thanks, babe.
always coming in with the little details.
Yes. All right. Well, until next time, do we know who's on next?
Next episode are two of our favorite people, Erasmus and Sophie. I was going to say one of our favorite couples, two of our favorite people. Same. Erasmus and Sophie are on together this time. We've had them both on individually for their respective episodes. And now we've got them on together to talk about how we can navigate relationship through human design. So two of our
really good conversations.
Two of our favorite people on two of our favorite subjects, human design and relationships. So super excited for that one. Stay tuned for that next week. Yeah, for sure.
Mark your calendars and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.